Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is 11:22 on a Monday. I don't know about you guys, but I'm in a basketball kind of mood for today's episode. How about you, Devin?
Sure.
Devin's favorite time of year. So, I guess with the book officially being closed on football season, I guess the UIL officially signed off on Saturday with the final round of state championship games. How about that, guys? They actually did it. They made it through the entire season. They crowned champions in every classification. So, shout out to everybody involved for seeing that through to the finish line.
Yeah, what kind of odds would you be given back in September?
Oh, yeah, I know. We were discussing it as part of some of our summer coverage and just the odds, and it just, I don't know, at the time it just felt like such a gloom and doom scenario. Yeah. So for us to have got to this point, that really is awesome that we got to complete this season in its finality.
What was even more impressive is just the very few postponements we had in the playoffs.
I know.
Cancellations,
too.
Yeah.
There was nothing after the second round, I believe, in 5A and 6A as far as games getting canceled. So, just great that they were able to finish things over the weekend and crown champions in every classification this season. So, yes, with football being in the rearview mirror, although I guess we are going to do our all-area football team voting later on today, so still got that big undertaking to knock out. But now we are officially in basketball mode, at least now for the next good while. So we got a lot of catching up to do because we had basically last week was sort of the midpoint for most of our girls districts. Although I'm sure Frisco's already like 2/3 of the way through their
30-game district schedule.
And then with the boys, I guess their midpoint for most of our districts at least is going to be this week. So again, we got a little bit of ground to make up. So what I wanted to do for today's episode is we're obviously not going to be able to get to everybody. Got a lot of we'll get to a small handful of schools today, but basically just wanted to kind of looking at, I guess, this first half of the season and us each discuss one thing, one on the girls' side, one on the boys, just something that's kind of caught our eye, just some storyline that has really emerged this season that has been of significance for us in our coverage area. And again, obviously still plenty more to come as far as making sure we hit a few more teams down the road. But today just kind of playing some catch up on some of the notable things that have stood out to us early in the season. Guys, we can start on the girls' side, talk a little bit about some of the things that have jumped out to us. Devin, on your end, be it whether it's in Garland ISD with Rowlett and Sachse, Mesquite ISD, or even Frisco ISD, what is something that has jumped out to you on the girls' side in your coverage so far?
Well, obviously, this being my first year to kind of be keeping an eye on Frisco, you got a defending state champion over there in Liberty, and that's shaping up to be a really fun race on the girls' side.
It always is.
Because Liberty's in fourth right now, but they're kind of riding into form. So that's a lot of that story's yet to be told. But I guess the thing, just with my familiarity with Sachse, covering Sachse over the years, was how they were going to react. They've kind of been the gold standard in Garland ISD for the last decade. They made 9 straight playoff appearances. They won 8 district titles during that time. Made the state tournament back a couple of years ago. But they carried a 69-game district winning streak into the season. But then you look at what they were bringing back, and there weren't a lot of familiar faces. They graduated Adel Tech, who was the district most valuable player, Tia Harvey. As I was getting into know Liberty, I noticed a familiar name over there because Journey Chambers, who was
transfer,
was a fresh played on the varsity as a freshman at Sachse last year, is now with Liberty.
Okay.
So, a lot of new faces, a lot of questions that needed to be answered. And then, like with all teams, with COVID, they didn't have the early season tournaments to work out those kinks.
Yeah.
And so you just had a handful of non-district games to get basically almost an entirely new roster together. So I was curious to see kind of how their learning curve was going to go. They did lose. They had that district winning streak snapped in the opener to a very good Lakeview team, a Lakeview team that's taken DeSoto to overtime and taken South Grand Prairie and stuff the field down to the wire. Yeah, that Lakeview
that's quite
team
impressive.
They kind of flying under the radar, but that's a team that could surprise some people come the playoffs.
No doubt. Wow.
So they didn't have the normal tournament schedule. And then to compound things, just quarantine issues. Sometimes it was their opponents. Most recently, they were on a 2-week quarantine. But from December 18th until last Thursday, they played 1 game.
No kidding.
In nearly a month. So they just really had a lot of time to gel, to come together. But their learning curve, they played 3 straight games last week. Went 2-1, lost the rematch to Lakeview, but it was a lot closer game than the first, and that's kind of a sign of progress. But another month from now, when the playoffs get going, I'm really interested to see what this Sachse team can do. I mean, Crystal Rose was the newcomer of the year last year as a freshman, and so she's kind of had to step into a starring role. They did have a couple seniors, Brianna Salazar, Shanice Rose, that weren't these stars, but they were still key parts of that rotation. But the big thing you look at is the younger players, and they've got 3 freshmen in London Oliphant, Micah Cooper, and Nina George, who have come in and stepped right in as 3 of their top scorers. Sydney Miller is a sophomore who's kind of come on strong this year. Kennedy Swans had a couple nice games of late. So a lot of upside, and it's one of those teams, like I say, you'd know a lot more about him if we could have seen him play in 2 or 3 tournaments. So it's still a work in progress, but I think they're going to be a team that's going to be flying under the radar because they're going to come in probably as a 2nd seed, but maybe even as a 3rd seed because they've yet to play Wiley. Wiley's currently in 2nd place in that district, but that's one of the quarantine issues. So while they played Lakeview twice, they haven't played Wiley at all yet. So we'll see. But, it's going to be one of those teams coming in as a 2nd or 3rd seed that people are used to them being the district champion, and I think they can make a little bit of noise once the playoffs roll around.
It is just kind of odd, I guess, with it coming in the same year that the football team, after lording over that district for so long, kind of fell back to the pack a little bit. Just reaffirms that just these things can be cyclical and whatnot. So, Sachse's had it's been a heck of a run for Sachse. It was at 69 consecutive district wins. Yeah. That's wild. How many years does that amass, though? That was
back to 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite the run.
And most, I went back and looked at it. I know I've done it by season. I don't think I did it through the entire streak. The average margin of victory was 25 to 30 points. And it wasn't just that they were winning. They were rarely ever challenged during that run.
But Sachse, you had mentioned Sachse, though, perhaps flying under the radar into the postseason. David, one team that will not be flying under the postseason, heading into the season, was Lake Dallas.
Yeah, and they're not going to be flying under the radar again.
No, not after the job that they did last season, making it to the regional tournament, one of its best seasons ever. Yeah. And they've got a good chunk of continuity back from that season, from that team. So, I kind of think this is where you wanted to go with yours. So just talk a little bit about Lake Dallas and I guess something that's jumped out to you on their end.
Yeah, I spent about 30 minutes, researching this last night. So this is definitely what I was going to talk about for girls.
There you go.
Obviously they did lose a couple of big players from last year. Obviously the district MVP Josephine Elliott, who's now playing at UT Tyler, then Dorian Norris, who's a first team selection. Those are huge losses.
Absolutely.
But still, this is a team that still had a lot of talent coming back, even though they were pretty young. Like you had a lot of good sophomores in that class, coming back this year, including Georgia Elliott, who
JoJo's little sister. I guess she's taller than Josephine.
Yeah, she's really tall. And then you have Cameron Richardson, who's a sophomore, who's really turned it on this year. She's been one of their best 3-point shooters this year. Bailey Broughton, I got to watch her playing this summer over there. Another guard that they have right there. I remember a game against the Colony. She had 10 points in the first quarter right there.
That's quite the start.
And then obviously one of the biggest good stories this year coming out of that team is the return of Mackenzie Buss.
Of course.
So she's only 5'4", and you look at her and it's like is this a varsity player? But she's a special player, man.
Absolutely.
She's so athletic. She makes she's so quick to the basket. She makes good decisions. So last year, it was just a tough way to see what happened to her because her freshman year she was district newcomer of the year, and then last year she didn't even get to have a season.
I know, because
she had the ACL tear, she had the MCL tear, she had some meniscus. So this even happened like a month before the season started, like a fall league game.
Oh yeah.
So just a poor break for her, but she's come back strong, and just added just another threat that the opposition has to take care of. So now for this Lake Dallas, it's who do we guard? Because if we guard this one person, this other person is going to go off. So they've been an impressive team so far with all that talent that they have. And then obviously another player I'd like to make sure I get on there is Allie Buchanan.
For sure.
Their forward right there. She recently had a double-double with 10 points and 11 rebounds. So, it's like pick your poison with this team right here. Right now they're 15-4 in the season. They're 7-0 in district play. And other than Grapevine, who's 14-4 in this year, those two teams battled to an overtime game, which Lake Dallas won 69-66 on January 5th.
Okay.
Their average margin of victory, besides Grapevine, is 34.2 points per game.
Okay, so they're leaving no doubt in this one.
So Yeah, so they're just they're just taking names right now. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I think they got a lot of motivation from all that happened last year. They first time that they've been that far in the playoffs since 2008. It was actually the first time they won a playoff game since 2008. Mm-hmm. So right now they're actually ranked like number 15 in Class 5A by the TABC. Mm-hmm. And obviously the big game that they still have left is another rematch with Grapevine, which is going to take place not this Friday, but the Friday after. I believe it's the 29th. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a team that's, like, if they win that game, they'll be district champions. It
is nice to see Buss, though, being able to pick up where she left off. Yeah. Because I know you weren't here at the time, but, man, she was amazing as a freshman. Yeah. She was second on the team in scoring and rebounding. Consider that, again, you said she's 5'4". She was their second leading rebounder as a freshman.
Wow.
And, again, yeah, she was the district newcomer of the year. She was our all-area newcomer of the year. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just basketball. She's also awesome in track. Yeah, she was a regional qualifier in the 100 and the triple jump, again, just as a freshman. So, you could make a case that back then that she was maybe the best overall athlete at that high school.
Yeah.
It does stink that, she didn't even get to have a sophomore season. Like you said, she injured the ACL in a fall league game, so, technically wasn't even part of the actual season itself. So it is, and you wonder, when that team was going on its run last year, getting to the regional tournament, you're just sitting back thinking, like, man, this is so great, but, man, just imagine if they had Mackenzie Buss, just how much that could have potentially elevated their play, as great as they were last season, to have a player like that as well. But yeah, like I said, it is nice to see that they are able to kind of pick up where they left off and not miss a beat, despite now having a bit more of a bullseye on their back after the run that they had last season. Let's see, for mine, I was, and this will kind of be a theme for my boys selection as well, I basically am looking at two teams that have made kind of quote-unquote the leap, as far as teams that were, kind of decent playoff teams last year, but have now, I guess, evolved to like full-fledged district championship favorites. On the girls' side, I'm talking about Plano East. And Plano East was a team that we focused on quite a bit last year. This was a fun team to monitor. It's, these are the types of teams that always, kind of catch my attention. And they're the teams that start a bunch of underclassmen really early on into their careers. They're not afraid to kind of throw them into that varsity fire, let them, take their lumps, work through those growing pains in hopes that they kind of come out on the other end much better for that. And, you look at the Plano East rotation, it's the same rotation as last season, because they have everybody back that played consequential minutes, at least in, throughout their run last season. Players like Kayla Cooper, Denavia Hall, Tiana Amos, Ada Anna Mequoy, Idar Udo, Taylor Haken, all those players have started games since they were freshmen. And you're seeing it now kind of pay off this season. It was a team that really kind of came on strong in the second half of district play last season. They went 5-1 during the second half of district play. They elevated their standing, I believe, from fourth place all the way up to second, right behind Plano. They went 2 rounds deep in the playoffs, lost a really, really close game to state-ranked Harker Heights, a game that Plano East was actually in position to win late. They had a lead inside the final minute of the fourth quarter. So you saw the promise there, and then they've now built off of that. They're 9-3 on the season. They're 7-0 in district play. They ran the table for the first half of District 6A. The calling cards have been defense and rebounding. This team scraps like hell on the defensive end. Hebron, just this last Friday, was the first team in district that scored more than 40 points on them. They're so athletic, so aggressive, so well connected on that end of the floor, and they've got that size inside with Udo and Hagen down low, and they will just stomp teams on the glass. And when I saw in their district opener against Hebron, they had something like, I think it was like 15, 17, 18 offensive rebounds, just something silly like that. And that's just, when you create those extra possessions, that is such an advantage. I said Udo and Hagen. Denavia Hall, who I mentioned earlier, she's a really good rebounder out of on the wing. They also have a transfer from Rowlett, Nevaeh Zavala, who comes off the bench, and she gives them some versatility and size as well. It's a solid team. At the same time, they've had to really kind of tough out some close games of late. Their last 3 games have been decided by 4 points or less. Hebron, who's state ranked at the time, Plano, who was state ranked earlier in the year, and then even Coppell on your end, David. They've but nevertheless that they've defeated, but they're undefeated in district. And the thing is that you look at the standings, and everybody else in the district has at least 2 losses. So they've got that extra cushion now, and they've already got the full head-to-head over Hebron, who is in second place as well. So they've put themselves in a pretty good position as far as being able to potentially lock up the program's first district title since 2008. And it is just kind of notable to see when you look at just kind of the recent history of Plano ISD girls basketball, how East has always been in the mix, but seldom have they ever been in this position where they're in the driver's seat. For the longest time, it was always Plano West with those teams that are Don Patterson, Kristen Perry, that were always contending for state titles. And then in recent years, you've seen pretty much since Rodney Belcher, took over at Plano for that 4 or 5 year stretch, the Lade Wildcats kind of elevating to the throne, obviously highlighted by that state championship back in 2018. But now you're seeing another changing of the guard there in PISD girls basketball, and it looks like that Plano East is starting to now kind of take that mantle. They're somehow, and again, we're recording this at 11:38, so I don't know if the TABC has updated their rankings yet. Somehow Plano East is not state ranked, and it is kind of jarring when you look at their resume. Like I said, they're 9-3 on the season. Their 3 losses all came in pre-district, and they were to Duncanville, DeSoto, and South Grand Prairie. Teams that, if you were to check the polls, are ranked 3, 4, and 5 in the state. And their losses to Duncanville and DeSoto were both by 6 points or less. So for the life of me, I'm not entirely sure how this team is not ranked at this point, considering that they just swept the number 18 team in the state rankings. So yeah, we'll see. Nevertheless, though, Plano East, though, having a great season, really building off the promise that they showed last season, and you're seeing this young core really start to kind of reach their potential, it seems. So yeah, at least that's kind of where we're at on the girls' side. On the boys' side, I'll get to my boys' team a little bit later. David, let's shift back to you for this. So, kind of talk about on the boys' side, what is something that has stood out to you early on this season?
I think just the scoring depth that Coppell has.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when you come into the season, the talent that they have with their juniors, with Anthony Black and Ryan Agrawal. Obviously, for their district all selections a year ago, Agrawal averaged. He led Agrawal as a sophomore. He averaged 16 points, which is a team lead. And now, you bring him and Black back, you see that those are the headliners, but you're going to interested to see who's going to be there as far as the depth purposes are concerned, because you did lose 2 really good players in Brandon Taylor and Adam Moser.
Oh, yeah.
Both of whom averaged over 11 points a game. And
they just brought a lot of intangibles to the mix, a lot of playmaking, lots of just leadership in general. Those things that, with players as young as Black and Agrawal, they're having to now kind of grow up a little bit in that respect. So they did lose a lot in terms of those kind of between the lines areas that those seniors can provide. But it sounds like they've got a nice little running mate as well.
Oh, tremendous running mate. Tremendous. Nazir Brown, who transferred over from LD Bell, and coincidentally, they've actually played with Agrawal and Black, and also Devon Grang, who's another junior, on the same AAU team through the Empires. So obviously, it's
kind of like that Plano West team that materialized a handful of years ago that won a state title. There's a lot of AAU connections there.
So we have kind of semi AAU team over here at Coppell this year too. So and Brown, he's just fearless. He brings that. Black's a slasher to the lane right there.
Yeah.
Brown's the same way as well too.
Okay.
Every time, I'm on video, recording him doing some highlights of the game. He's always coming towards the basket. He's always scoring, and I'll at least get an and one on him screaming that out loud on a highlight video right there. So, in that game against Louisville recently, Louisville was ranked, I think, number 16 in the state at that time, a couple weeks ago. He scored 33 points in that game. And 18 of them were in the fourth quarter. And it was a game that Coppell looked like for a while that they were in control of. I think they're leading by 17 points in the first half. And then Louisville, they got shut down Agrawal for a couple quarters. He scored like 10 points in the first quarter. Didn't have anything for the next couple quarters, and then they got back into the game. Got some good looks at the basket with their motion offense right there, and then they took the lead going into the fourth quarter because they hit a buzzer beater 3 from Will Curtis over there on the right wing, and they were up 55-54 going into the fourth quarter. So, but thankfully, Brown, it seems like when the moment's big, he takes over. So he had 33 points in that game. Friday they played Plano, and he scored 25 points in that game.
Okay.
And then the previous game against Flower Mound, who we'll get to here in a minute or so, he scored 26 points in that game. So he's just it's just been an unbelievable addition to them, and it's definitely taken some pressure off for Agrawal and Black right there.
Because, Coppell is a team that really came into this season with, when you look at what they've done these last couple of years, expectations are pretty big over there, coming off back-to-back district titles. Mm-hmm. You've got arguably the two best players in the district already in Agrawal and Black. With all due respect, I guess maybe Louisville's Kylan Green might have something to say about that. But nevertheless, though, that is a very top-heavy roster that Coppell had. So to have another element like that who already, again, has that built-in chemistry with those two already, that is massive, and it certainly has kept Coppell in the hunt for a potential third straight district championship. Now, they always make it interesting on themselves. Last year, even though they won the district title, they had to withstand 2 losses to Louisville, 2 Keontae George-fueled losses to Louisville. And this year, they've got a big one coming up on Friday because they do have 1 loss on their district resume to Marcus, who they got a little bit of help, though, because Flower Mound was able to top Marcus last week by the awkward score of 30-28. So, but yes, nevertheless, though, it has positioned this game on Friday, this rematch between Coppell and Marcus, for the inside track on the district title. So what do you know? Coppell right back on the stage.
And also the thing, Coppell, the first time that they played them this season on December 19th, Coppell was just coming off a quarantine.
Okay, yeah.
So, and that was the second game of a back-to-back. They played this game was on a Saturday. They played the previous night before. Mm-hmm. So, after 2 weeks of being in quarantine,
sure,
you don't know how their body game shape is going to be. Mm-hmm. So, that was tough on them. But ever since then, they've won a lot of games. They're 11-2 overall, 5-1 in the mm-hmm. district right here, and they're back in the TABC rankings. I think they were 25 last week, and I'm not sure what they're going to be this week. I'm pretty sure they're going to be a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Coppell's wanted a little bit of revenge on Friday, and plus it's at their place, so it's going to be an exciting game.
How about you, Devin? What is something on the boys' side that has caught your that has jumped onto your radar to start the season?
There's been some interesting storylines. You just look over at 9-5A, and you have a Frisco team in first place that wasn't even picked to make the playoffs this year. They got a good win over Wakeland. Mm-hmm. But we'll dig a lot more into that as we can start talking about playoff races and coming down the stretch. One of the biggest surprises so far, though, is Horn. And it shouldn't be a surprise. They won the district championship mm-hmm. last year. That was their first ever district title. But they lost a lot off that team. They lost, Zakir Sawyer was the district MVP. They had 5 all-district selections a year ago, and all 5 of them were seniors. So coming back into the year, even though in the Texas Association of Basketball Coaches preseason poll they were picked number 1, but you kind of go, okay, was that just based on last
some of that might have been
results?
getting that.
I don't know how much that's broken down district by district, team by team. But me personally, I wondered a lot what this Horn team was going to do, just because there was a lot of unfamiliar faces stepping into. You had guys that were part of the rotation maybe, but didn't play a lot, and some guys that were JV guys stepping in to take over these big roles, but. Here we are going into basically the halfway point tomorrow night, and Horn's sitting in a 3-way tie for first place with Rockwall and Rockwall Heath. Really impressive win. I think last Wednesday, that's really kind of what opened my eyes, is they were able to beat Rockwall. Mm-hmm. And to put it in perspective, Rockwall and Heath played a couple nights later, and Rockwall won by 30. So that's a solid Rockwall bunch over there. But they've just kind of done it by committee. It's a different guy that steps up. It's whether it be Bryson Smith or a Sean Moaning or Seppo Williams, Denarius Carter. It's the different guys, and they don't have, a guy that's going to go out there and score 25, 30 points a game. But it's just kind of by committee. Again, the game against Rockwall, the final score was 43-41. They, played hard-nosed defense. They kept the tempo down. Against Rockwall, who likes to push it, is a key to win. And again, like I say, that victory last year just showed the progress they've made, because they got off to a rough start at non-district. Mm-hmm. They were, I believe, 4-9, 4-10 coming in, in non-district games. But that's. You wonder, you see these teams kind of rise up and win a district title and go away for another few years. But it's the consistency that you'd like to see, in building a program. And Andre Wadi over there at Horn, that's what he's been trying to do. And, this is kind of a testament to the program itself. is we can go out and win a district title. We can graduate our entire starting lineup, but just reload and not go away. So really interested to see what Horn can do down here the second half of the season.
That's good to see because I saw Horn in non-district play in a game against Hebron. They lost that game 50-32. It was a bit of a rough watch on both sides, but nevertheless, even in defeat, you could see the promise, especially on defense with that team. Despite Hebron building a big lead, Hebron only scored 15 points in the entire second half against Horn, and they still were playing. And it was early in the season, so you're still playing your usual starters, their normal minutes. But yeah, they just the way that Horn's defense really kind of evolved that game. You mentioned Seppo Williams. He was the guy that really stood out in that game. He only had 2 points, but he had 4 steals and 6 blocks. He was everywhere that second half. He really ignited that defensive effort, and you could kind of start to see things as the game went along, them start to kind of get a better idea of what they had. Because I remember that team last season and them being very, very senior heavy, and I did not recognize a single face on the court in that game. So it is nice to see that they have been able to kind of round back into form and are back contending for a district title. Let's see where I wanted to go for this to round out this podcast. You had mentioned a team that was projected, to win the district, on your end, despite maybe not having the personnel that you would think. This was a team that was projected to outright miss the playoffs altogether, and it floors me because you kind of could see the, kind of a very similar trajectory to the Plano East girls that I just mentioned earlier. The McKinney boys, who are currently ranked number 10 in the state in 6A, they have taken that next step. They have taken the leap, so to speak. This is a team, I believe, did you see their playoff game last year against Horn as well in the second round? Was that you or Kendrick that covered that?
I believe Kendrick.
Okay. It was a game that went to overtime that Horn wound up winning, but, McKinney kind of fits that same timeline as Plano East in that they've got, so many players that all played massive minutes as freshmen. Jacoby Walter, Jacoby Campbell, Alexander Mequoy, Devin Vincent. I mean, these are all guys that were kind of thrown into the fire at a really, really early stage in their high school careers. And again, there were signs of promise last season. They just as far as just staying competitive against more seasoned teams like Allen and Prosper and whatnot. But then they finished third in the district. They go 2 rounds deep, and again, an overtime loss to a state-ranked, senior-laden Horn team. So you're thinking that's a nice little spot to leave off of as far as being able to potentially build off of that then for next season. And with so much of that experience back, they've not only taken that next step, but they flat out look like one of the best teams in the state. I mean, just again, number 10 in the state right now. Their only losses were to Richardson and South Grand Prairie, who are number 4, number 5 in the state. So, and that was one thing that head coach Wes Watson, he did not hold back as far as scheduling up. I mean, they played a very, very challenging non-district schedule, including a matchup with number 1 ranked Waxahachie, who that McKinney actually won. That was kind of their big coming out moment. I don't know if Waxahachie was at full strength in that one, but nevertheless, though, an impressive win by the Lions. And I mean, they've just handled business elsewhere. I mean, they rolled through the first half of their district schedule. They're 6-0 right now in district play. The average margin of victory is 24.8 points. And this is again with Allen and Prosper and Denton Braswell, which was a really strong program at the 5A level last year. And they've blown through everybody. I believe the closest game they've had at district has been 17 points. I mentioned that personnel that they have coming back. They're led by Jacoby Walter, who I believe 247 has him as the number 2 ranked sophomore in the state. Very, very smooth offensive game. He can light it up for 25, 30 points on a heartbeat. Alexander Mequoy is a guy that's been on our radar in recent years because he was our all-area defensive player of the year last season. He's been starting since his freshman year. You've got Campbell, Vincent as playmakers. They've got a guy Thatcher McClure, who's just this dead-eye outside shooter. He's also got a little bit of spring to his game. He can get up and put it down if he has to. As far as I got to see them earlier in the year in one of those losses in their game against Richardson. The one thing that stood out, they're not the biggest team, so I mean, Anna Mequoy, as great a defender as he is, as much of a presence as his length can be inside, he is only just 6'5". So there is room for bigger teams to perhaps take advantage of that, and you saw that in that game against Richardson. Despite them doing a pretty commendable job defending Rylan Griffin, who's one of Richardson's one of the better players in the state for that matter. They held him below his usual output. It was actually their big man, Gannon Parker, who really gave them a lot of trouble inside with a double-double, lots of second-chance opportunities. But nevertheless, though, this is still a very, very encouraging team, as evidenced by the job that they've done kind of blowing through this district. And it's a team that kind of like those Plano East girls, they still haven't hit their ceiling yet. There's still a lot of basketball to be played for these guys, and I'm kind of anxious to see where it goes. I don't know if they're a year away from being, full-fledged, potentially making that leap from now district title contender to maybe state title contender. Who knows? But this, there's still a lot of very encouraging basketball to be played over at McKinney, as this team is they're just getting rolling with this young core of theirs. That's just kind of where we're at right now as far as some things that have jumped out to us through this, I guess, this first half of basketball season. Obviously, again, still a long way to go. Got a lot to be settled as far as playoff races, district title races, and whatnot, and stuff that we will get to. Obviously, plenty more teams to talk about that we'll get to in the weeks to come. So, folks, that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. We'll be back at this right around the same time next week to break down some more hoops. And until then, folks, take care, and we will talk to y'all later.